The Oracle Network.
Talentless?
Talentless Talent. It's me, your host, Kylie Dills. Talentless Talent is a podcast about those with extraordinary talent. We're talking about conspiracy theories. We're talking to comedians. We're talking to painters. We are talking to those who make portraits. We're talking to dollhouse makers. We are talking to people about sports. We're talking to comedians. We're talking to sex workers. We're talking to models. We're talking to videographers. We have it all, including a very special pickle time. Talentless Talent is hosted by me, Kylie Dills, somebody who has no talent. So be sure to tune it in every Thursday. I'll catch you there, my Talentless Talent babes. We're having a good time.
Talentless Talent.
Talentless Talent?
It's Talentless Talent.
Talentless Talent with Kylie Dills.
Hey, Rainbow Warriors. This is my disclaimer. Beyond the Rainbow is a true crime podcast. It's not suitable for young children, and maybe not even for some adults. I tend to swear like a sailor, and I'm kind of proud of that. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. Welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ. There's something that's been bothering me. I need to address the ads on podcasts, and in particular, the ads on this podcast. Almost all podcasts have ads. Some have them in the beginning and in the end, like mine. Some have them in the beginning, the middle, and the end. I've now received a couple of kind of crummy reviews about too many ads being on here. So I'm going to take a minute to explain ads on podcasts. And I'll pay special attention to my ads because really I only can speak for me on this. The ads that are professionally done are called dynamic ads. And all you have to do is fast forward through them if you don't want to listen. The lovely part about podcasts is that they're free for you and me to listen to, which is how it should be. So drudging through a podcast's few minutes of ads is actually a really small price to pay when you're getting entertainment and the knowledge we learn when we listen to the episodes. Those dynamic ads are what is put into each of my episodes via my podcast's host site, Spreaker. Every time someone listens to this show, those ads are played and I make a teensy amount of money for those ads. However, I think there's a misconception that podcasters make a lot of money putting out their podcast. It's true, podcasting has made me rich as fuck. Wrong. Here's an example of how much I make. Thursday, August 5th, I made a whopping $1.32 off my ads. A high day could be $5.34, and a low day would be 23 cents. If you hear a host who is doing their own ad for a product like Best Fiends, and I didn't get paid this time for mentioning their name, but those hosts are getting a one-time amount for writing the ad, recording, editing, and playing the ad. I personally prefer the dynamic ads because they're accumulative and I don't have to write something creative to say about the product. For many of us podcasters, these ads are the only consistent money we have coming in for our podcast. It's not a lot. At least for me, it's not. But it's a little something to help pay for the electricity I use in making the podcast episodes, or for keeping my website up and running. I make anywhere between $12 and $90 a month on the ads, depending on how many listens I get. Of course, bigger podcasts will make more. Many podcasts have what is called a Patreon. A Patreon account has monthly subscribers. Those podcasts with a Patreon offer different pay tiers per month with different perks, depending on how much you pay per month. I was going to make one, but I decided against it. Other revenue I have for this podcast is my TeePublic merch store, where I've made $56 from shirt sales since I started it 8 months ago. And I have my Buy Me a Coffee account, where I've made $13.78 total after buymeacoffee.com takes their share out. I appreciate what I've earned, and I'm not complaining. I love what I do. But please realize a lot does go into putting out an episode. First is a bunch of reading and research, and then writing, recording, editing, publishing, and promoting. And I do all this by my lonesome. It's done for my heart and the passion I have for my community. I guess ultimately what I'm saying is, my ads stay. Either fast forward through the ads or listen to them. I don't really care. But please quit giving me bad or mediocre reviews for the inconvenience of having the ads in there when you're getting free content. Yes, a 3-star review isn't horrible, and the reviewer did say great podcast, but it's still lowering my rating score and the visibility for this show. If you'd like for me to make a Patreon with a tier that will give you episodes ad-free, let me know, DM me. And I would be happy to make one and let you pay for a monthly subscription for no ads. And there would be bonus content. As for the constructive criticism, yeah, I can totally get down with that. That same reviewer doesn't like the sound effects in the episodes. No problem. I'll refrain from adding sound effects to any of the episodes. No more sound effects. If you have constructive criticism for this show, please message me with those and any suggestions you might have to make the show better. It helps me grow, and it helps me to give you the content you want to hear. I'm so pleased to bring you our very first non-podcaster, Rainbow Warrior presented Missing But Not Forgotten segment. With that, please listen to our friend Jamie as she tells you about this episode's missing.
Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. This episode's missing LGBTQ plus person is 21-year-old Brian Allen Hatfield from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Brian disappeared the morning of May 9th, 2004. Brian and 2 friends were returning home from Lafayette, Louisiana, and he had just dropped his friends off at their prospective homes, and he was never seen again after that. 3 weeks later, Brian's 2000 white Chevy Cavalier was found at a Chevron gas station parking lot. There were no signs of a struggle, but Brian's license plate was missing. Brian's checkbook and credit card had been used after his disappearance, but the person who used it could not be traced. A person that had Brian's license plate on their car was pulled over but later released. Foul play is suspected, but the case has grown cold. Brian is a black man who stands 5 feet 8 inches, weighs about 120 pounds. He is classified as a cross-dresser but not defined as trans. Brian was wearing women's clothing when he disappeared. He has black hair and brown eyes. Brian has a tattoo of a scorpion on his right shoulder and the word Taz tattooed on his lower left leg. If he were found alive today, he would be 38 years old. If you have any information on Brian, please contact the Baton Rouge Police at 225-389-3844.
Thank you, Jamie. You did a great job. If you would like to be a Rainbow Warrior reporter and tell about a missing but not forgotten person on this show, please DM me on the socials. That would be Beyond the Rainbow Pod on Facebook and Instagram, or Rainbow Crimes on Twitter, Tumblr, TikTok, and also on Instagram. If you do decide you want to do this segment, I'll send you a write-up on the missing person. You can use your phone or computer to record, and then email it back to me. It's that easy. 12-year-old Jennifer was walking home from school in Victor Harbor, which is just south of Adelaide in Australia. She kicked a rock in the road and she was thinking about the boy she was crushing on in class. Her thoughts then turned to her history assignment that was due tomorrow. Then she wondered what her mom would have for her in a way of snack when she got home. So much to think about for such a young girl. Her blonde hair tossed back and forth as she ran up the sidewalk leading to the home she shared with her mom, 46-year-old Bernadette, and her kind of surrogate mom, who was Bernadette's life partner, 55-year-old Frankie Marshall. Also living in the home with the three was Jennifer's little half-sister, 4-year-old Rebecca. With only problems a 12-year-old girl should have on her mind, Jennifer swung open the door to the house. The smell and sight of blood hit her senses immediately. Jennifer saw her mother lying in a pool of her own blood. Bernadette's throat had been slit. She had been stabbed, bashed with some object, and shot 5 times. There was also a knife sticking out of Bernadette's head. This murder had to be personal. Jennifer's sole caretaker, the mother she adored for 12 years, had been taken from her in such a horrendous way on October 25th, 2002. Screaming and crying, Jennifer ran from the house towards the street. Soon, curious neighbors came out to see what the ruckus was. In 1993, Bernadette Liston was in a failed marriage to a man that had fathered 4 of her children, 2 toddlers and 2 older children. And that's about all the information I could find on the 2 older children. But the toddlers were a son who was 2 years old and Jennifer, who was 3. That year, the son nearly drowned in a horrific accident. He was admitted to the hospital for an extended period of time. It was at this hospital Bernadette would meet a rather butch woman named Frankie Marshall. Frankie was in a very similar situation as Bernadette. A young boy in Frankie's care was also at that hospital, having nearly drowned. Both little boys would eventually leave the hospital somewhat invalid. Soon after her son was discharged from the hospital, Bernadette and her estranged husband would receive a settlement of over $3.1 million as a trust to care for their son. Within a year or 2, Bernadette's son would die from complications of his near-drowning accident. The death of the child would further deteriorate Bernadette and her husband's marriage, leading to divorce. The money that was left in Bernadette's son's trust would be split between Bernadette and her ex-husband. In a very strange coincidence, Frankie's boy would also die. Bernadette and Frankie had kept in contact with one another since they met at the hospital. They would lean on each other for support. The grief the 2 women were dealing with would forge a bond between them and bring them closer. It didn't take long for the relationship to turn romantic and sexual. The 2 women would move in together and raise Jennifer. In 1997, the lesbian couple started to talk about having another baby, one that would belong to just the 2 of them. In mutual agreement, Frankie talked her biological brother Daryl Purcell into impregnating Bernadette. This was not done via a doctor's office or with a porn magazine and a turkey baster. Daryl would have to go in, literally. Once Bernadette became pregnant, Daryl was to have nothing more to do with the child, except to be Uncle Daryl. In 1998, Rebecca was born to Frankie and Bernadette, and to Uncle Daryl. The way I see it, Frankie must have really loved Bernadette and truly wanted a baby with her to be so willing to share her woman with her brother. What Frankie hadn't realized was the baby-making night would be the first of many intimate trysts Bernadette and Daryl would have together. As Bernadette and Daryl's love grew for one another, Frankie started to clue in on her girlfriend and brother's romance. Bernadette and Frankie's relationship was becoming a powder keg of trouble. Frankie started to become abusive, most of it verbal and emotional towards Bernadette.
Fucking bitch. Fucking lying bitch.
That became the popular verbiage for Frankie to direct at Bernadette. The arguments were always over Daryl, and why Daryl had to be around all the time. Bernadette tried to calmly remind Frankie that Daryl was Rebecca's birth father, and he had a right to see her. Frankie would become unglued, stating that wasn't in the agreement. I'm not dissing the victim, but that was kind of a shitty thing to do to Frankie. Just days before her murder, Bernadette would write her sister a letter. In it, she says, "Frankie and I are having some problems at the moment. It is certainly a horrible feeling to feel something so special fall apart and slip away. I don't know if we'll get through this, but I guess one good thing for me, if there's anything good, is knowing I can survive, and I'm only hoping we can get through." Bernadette's sister also recalled Bernadette commenting to her about Frankie keeping a gun in the house, but Frankie, knowing that it freaked Bernadette out so much, moved the gun outside to their shed. That only brought a minuscule amount of comfort to Bernadette, but she left the topic be. Somehow, Frankie got wind of the fact Bernadette was planning on leaving her for her brother Daryl. Even 12-year-old Jennifer confirmed this. Her mother had told her that they were going to live with Daryl and not to say a word to Frankie about it. She told Jennifer it would be their secret. Days before she died, Bernadette had written a $40,000 check to Frankie. This was to help Frankie pay off the home they shared. And she had written a $30,000 check to Daryl. She wanted him to go put a down payment on a home for her, Jennifer, Rebecca, and him. The morning of Bernadette's murder, Frankie and little Rebecca left the house around 9:30 a.m. But Frankie has no alibi to corroborate her story. The coroner was able to determine Bernadette had been murdered in the morning. Frankie eventually was arrested for Bernadette's murder. No murder weapon has ever been found. And on top of all her other injuries, Bernadette suffered 2 broken hands that were thought to be from her trying to defend herself. Her ribs were broken, and one of the knives found that stabbed her was bent due to so much force being exerted into the stabs. Frankie was really the only suspect police had. That's why she was arrested, charged with first-degree murder, and given a courtroom trial. Frankie's defense presented an almost laughable case for their client. Frankie would not take the stand at her trial, and not one single witness was called in her defense. But maybe this is because her defense knew that the most damning evidence that the prosecution had was a set of bloody footprints made by an Ugg boot. The defense for Frankie claimed that Frankie didn't even know what an Ugg boot was. And prosecution presented a picture of Frankie wearing some. Whoops! But because the only evidence was circumstantial, even with a clear motive, there wasn't enough physical evidence to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Frankie was guilty. The jury had no choice but to return a verdict of not guilty. This would release Frankie from custody and clear her of the murder of her girlfriend, Bernadette. Frankie's first words she spoke to media as she left the courtroom and made her way to the taxi was, "I feel great. No further comment." This case is almost 20 years old now. It remains a cold case with no unicorn justice for Bernadette. In my opinion, Frankie Marshall got away with murder. And if it wasn't Frankie, then it was her brother Daryl. But what would Daryl's motive have been? It obviously had to be someone Bernadette knew. And Frankie was the one with the strongest motives. The crime scene itself was complete overkill. It highly resembled a crime of passion and fear of losing. Frankie was losing her girlfriend Bernadette to her brother, and she would be losing her daughter to both of them, since Bernadette and Daryl were Rebecca's biological parents. It's tough to believe that there was no DNA from the crime scene to incriminate Frankie, not even under Bernadette's fingernails. With her broken hands, we know she was at least trying to defend herself. It's also hard to fathom that almost after 20 years, the killer wouldn't confess to a friend that they killed Bernadette. Who knows? Maybe the killer did confess and the friends are just really immoral and good secret keepers. I think the saddest thing, though, is that poor 12-year-old Jennifer had to find her mother in that gruesome scene. Jennifer's married with her own children now, but she cries still that her mom can't be around to watch her kids grow up. Jennifer said Bernadette wanted to be a grandmother someday. If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic abuse, please get help. In Australia, 1-800-RESPECT, 1-800-RESPECT, is an organization that can assist you. Online, hotpeachpages.net, all one word, hotpeachpages.net, is another resource that has abuse information in 115 different languages. Please get help. Our quickie crime this episode is a Rainbow Warrior suggestion. A big shout out and thank you to Sherry Lynn Gleason for this episode's quickie. Sherry Lynn sent this case to me months ago on Twitter. I was just never quite sure where to put it, but I think this fits the quickie crime perfectly. In spite of the chill in the air on January 8, 2013, 59-year-old Jim Allen was sweating profusely. He stood on top of the towering parking structure at the Texas A&M University campus. Jim typed his very last text. "Killing myself now. You will be prosecuted for blackmail." Jim hit the send button, and he threw himself off of the structure. He instantly died as his body landed on the ground below. Several weeks before this, Jim, who had a wife and 2 adult autistic sons, had confessed to his wife he was having an online relationship with a young trans woman. The young trans woman was underage, and now she was threatening to out him to his colleagues, students, and family if Jim didn't pay her $5,000. Let me stop right here and explain something about this case. There's quite a few articles about this case, and nearly all of them differ in detail. For example, some say that Jim met the girl on Mocospace. Others say they met on gay.com. Some articles say it was the girl threatening the blackmail. Others say it was the girl's father. Regardless of the disparity, a man completed suicide because some horrible human on the other side of technology was trying to extort money from him. The horrible human turned out to be a 37-year-old Louisiana man named Daniel Duplacer. And again, media information on Daniel is askew. Some articles say he himself posed as a trans teenager and the trans teen's father. Others say he paid a young woman to pose, and yet another said that he made his underage niece pose in mostly nude and compromising positions. This niece had been abused by Daniel before, because allegedly Daniel was arrested in 2011 for aggravated incest with her. So as you see, there's so many different stories and accounts of what happened. It was impossible for me to uncover the truths in this case. But besides Jim's death, here is something that media all agreed upon. Daniel was arrested and charged with extortion. He pleaded not guilty. The jury, however, found him guilty. and the judge sentenced him to only 1 year, which I'm sure he didn't even serve 365 days of. 1 stinking year for sparking a consequence that would cause a man and his family pain forever. Now, you can look at the victim and say, hey, he deserved it. He was a perv macking on an underage trans girl. There's that. I don't believe he deserved to die, especially since he was being manipulated by untruths, and he was still a victim. But even more so, his family were victims. There was no unicorn justice for anyone in this case. Love you, Rainbow Warriors, and remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.